How you guys doing tonight? Good? Yeah, it's good to see you. It's a good amount of people here. Great. Welcome to Vintage. Hey, if we never met before, my name is Jay. I'm on the leadership team here. Get the awesome privilege of directing and pastoring the Vintage community. But I don't do it alone. I got an incredible team of leaders and volunteers. They're the greatest. And obviously, got an awesome band here that's filled mostly of volunteers, and you wouldn't come if I was in the band, regardless. Primarily if I was singing, probably, but so I've got one of those voices where the louder the music is, the better I sound, right? And I used to sing karaoke once in a while, which is funny in and of itself, but you know, every once in a while I like to belt out Toto Africa or whatever. I would always encourage the people in the room, the louder they sing, the better I sound, so let's make this a sing-along. But anyways, I get the awesome privilege of praying over what does God want to speak to us in our moments together on a Tuesday night. And so I pray through series and what we do and what we look at for a month. And so this month, the series is called Moments. And it's interesting, right? I mean, our lives are a sum of moments, right? I mean, they're a grand total of moments, individual moments in our lives. And let's face it, many of these moments, or most of these moments, we just find ourselves in what we'd call like the routine, right? The ordinary, right? The everyday, mundane, the moment of brushing your teeth and flossing, hopefully, because then you'll live 7 years longer. The moment, of going to work or going to class, going to bed in the morning, waking up, this mundane, this routine. But there's also like these defining moments in our lives, right? These powerful, emotional, defining moments that, in a sense, change the trajectory of our life. Now, there's positive ones, right? Graduation, right? How many people are graduating this May? Raise your hand. All right, awesome, right? I didn't even know if that moment would come for me in my undergrad. Like, will I ever graduate? We're in year 5. Oh, wait, we're going to head into year 6? Okay, for a bachelor's degree? Wow, all right. So it could be graduation, or maybe it's, you landing your first job or stepping into your career path, right? Maybe it's an I do moment, right? When you walk down an aisle and say I do in front of friends, family, and most importantly, in front of God. And these moments change the trajectory of your life. It's almost like your life is a sense of before and after that moment. Like life was like this before that moment, and now it's like this because of that. And of course, we have moments that are maybe painful or represent great loss, right? The loss of someone close to us. Maybe it's the loss of a relationship, just in terms of someone who you thought loved you and you thought you loved them, and that's no longer a thing. Or maybe it's, death, a family member or a friend. And your life changed because of that. And in a lot of ways, you changed because of it, right? And you have questions of like, what kind of person would I be had this not happened? Yeah, of course, this was bad, this was painful, this was loss, but would I still be the same person I am today if that didn't happen? These are all things that we can sit and think about and ponder, and at times we find ourselves doing that in our busy lives. So this month we want to look at those powerful moments, those meaningful moments, and how you and we can leverage them in our lives. And here's the thing that science has a hard time explaining in terms of us as human beings, as humanity, is, one thing that kind of resonates with all of us here is we want our lives to matter. For some reason in there, we want our lives to matter. Like we seek out meaning and purpose. And in a sense, we're like, I don't know what that is half the time. I just know this. I don't want to waste my life. I don't want my life to become meaningless. And so most of us want to have an impact on the world. And at times we dream of having an impact that's a global size, but of course there's many times where we want to have an impact on our families or our friends, our places of employment, in our programs. We want to make an impact, right? We want people to know that we were there. We want to leave a mark, in a sense. But that costs something, doesn't it? Leaving an impact, that costs something. And we see many characters in the scriptures that make an impact, that have defining moments. And we read about them. And of course, these people are filled with flaws, right? They have their flaws, and we see them and we get to read about them, which in a sense kind of comforts us. But also in a sense, some of these people that we read about, man, they're just overall, they're kind of intimidating, right? I mean, we look at some of these people of faith and we're like, man, I don't know, those are some tough shoes to fill. Think about King David. We're talking about a guy who was a shepherd, but at the same time was a musician, so he played the harp. At the same time, he was this mighty warrior. And so we're talking about this guy who looked really good, who could fight well, and had music skills, so he probably was, had a great game with the ladies, right? Because musicians just have that. As you can tell, I've got that envy tonight. And so he naturally has that advantage. And of course, a king that was filled with flaws. And we see that, with Bathsheba. And he wanted someone else's wife so bad that he not only slept with her, he had her husband put on the front lines of a war just so he would be killed. And so we see some dark moments in the life of David. Or we read about Esther, and we see basically that Esther entered what would be the Miss America pageant, right? And she wins it. So we see someone like Esther and we're like, dude, it's because she was beautiful. And so of course, right? Of course you're going to have 1.2 million followers because you're beautiful, right? You're going to be an Instagram model. And that's intimidating for those of us who don't look like that. And so you read about some of these characters, Abraham or Moses and splitting the sea and all this stuff. And let's face it, I don't know if you're like me, but that can be kind of intimidating to say, hey, I've got this longing in my life to have an impact, to have a meaningful life. I have that longing deep inside, but man, that's not in my deck of cards. I can't live a life like that. I can't leave an impact like that. That's why the story in 2 Kings 7 is so meaningful to me, and I want to camp in there tonight. But the question I want to ask you up front is you personally, what are you willing to trade to make an impact for God? If it's going to cost you something to make an impact for God, a meaningful impact that is an eternal impact for a kingdom, the only kingdom that's going to last forever, what are you willing to trade in your life to make a lasting impact for God? But the story in 2 Kings 7, our heroes in 2 Kings 7 are some of the least likely people that we would have thought of in that time, in the time of Israel, where Israel finds itself suffering from a famine and surrounded by some of its enemies. And so we're going to read, and I'm going to pause and call a number of timeouts and kind of add my commentary as we go through the story. And so it starts off in 2 Kings 7, where the great prophet Elisha says something from the Lord to the people of Israel. He says this, "Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a sea of flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." So pause real quick. So what Elijah's saying is, right now, we're in a famine, which means low supply, great demand. So flour or barley or food, man, that's at a premium, right? That's more valuable than perhaps gold or fine jewelry. I mean, they're in a state now where people will trade valuable things just for food. It actually got so bad that we see earlier on that they were resorting to cannibalism. And so there was this woman who said, I'll make a deal with you. Let's boil and cook your baby tonight and have it. And then when we need to, we'll cook my baby and have that for food. And they actually did that. And then the woman backed out of it because she didn't want to give up her baby anymore. And they actually had to go to court because of it. This is the state in which Israel's finding itself. We read kind of a picture of this in Revelation, right? Where bread can purchase gold, where bread was more valuable than bars of gold. And so this is the state in which Israel finds itself in. And so Elisha says that hear the word of the Lord, this time tomorrow, within 24 hours, things are going to change. Right now, things are very expensive. Food is really expensive, right? Prices of food is like Whole Foods times 2. But tomorrow, Aldi's is coming, right? Tomorrow, Aldi's is coming, and we can get some cheap stuff, right? Or for someone who likes clothes, like, yeah, shirts, they're at like supreme prices. But tomorrow, it's thrift shop time, right? We get to pop some tags. Things are going to be cheaper and more affordable. All right? So this is what Elisha says that God is going to do in the nation of Israel. So in verse 2, an officer has an opinion on it, and he says this, the officer on whose arm the king was leaning said to the man of God, said to Elisha the prophet, look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of the heavens, could this happen? Like, let's be real. Could this happen? You will see it with your own eyes, answered Elisha, but you will not eat any of it. So the officer doubts. He says, let's be real. Even if God were to split the heavens, right? Open the floodgates of heavens and provide. Interesting, though, that God had already done that in human history, in the wilderness, when he provided manna. So God did that. He opened the floodgates of the heavens. But we got a doubter, right? But maybe we shouldn't be as harsh on him as we want to be. Because how many times do you and I doubt God? How many times do you and I have this thought, yeah, like, God doesn't really work that way. God doesn't do those kind of things for me. God doesn't do those miracles in my time and space. Yeah, sure, maybe he's done it in another time, in another space, but like that's not my life. That's not God with me. How many times have you and I doubted how God can work in our friends, in our families, how God can work in some tough circumstances and situations? How many times do we go, yeah, I don't want to have these expectations on God because I don't want to be disappointed. So I'm just going to chalk it up as, God doesn't really work that way, and ultimately everything's going to end up okay. And some of us, we've been so disappointed in our lives, maybe even from some of our parents, that we don't want to put those expectations on God because we don't want to be disappointed. So we guard God from our own hearts so that we don't live in disappointment. But the officer says, I don't see this happening. All right, picking back up in verse 3. Thanks, Griffin. You've been a champ. He's running ProPresenter. Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there, and we will die. And if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die. So we've got 4 lepers outside of the city gates. Now, we're not exactly sure what kind of leprosy they had. They used leprosy for a number of skin ailments. Now, at the worst, leprosy was a death sentence. It would eat away at your flesh. But this was definitely some sort of skin condition that they had at the very least. And they were outside the city where they weren't protected, where they weren't in community. They weren't receiving the benefit of being in community because whatever they had was contagious and nobody wanted it. So in a way, they're exiled. And so we have 4 lepers that are standing outside of the city, and they go, all right, let's look at our current circumstances. Well, we could go back into the city. We're not really supposed to be in there because we're contagious. We don't want to affect our friends, our family, our loved ones. But we go in there, the famine's still in there, so we're still going to die. Or we can stay here, and we're going to die. Or we can go to one of our enemies, the Arameans. Now, some translations like the ESV or the KJV describes them as the Syrians, same group of people. They're the enemies. They're at a camp. They're waiting to strike down at the right time because of this famine. And they go, well, we can go there and die, so we can stay here and die. We can go in the city here and die, and we can go there, and maybe they'll just kill us and we'll die. But maybe they looked at it as, hey, if we go there, at least our death might be a bit quicker, or less drawn out, less painful. They weren't necessarily optimists, but they necessarily weren't pessimists, right? Maybe they were rationalists. It's like me, when people are like, the glass is half empty, or the glass is half full. Well, rationalists look at it and say, well, maybe the glass is twice as big as it needs to be. And so maybe they weren't necessarily optimists, but they were rationalists and said, well, maybe these are our best odds. And so that's what they decided to do, is go to the Arameans or the Syrians, again, and they weren't a massive rival to Israel. They were kind of more like a pain. So they definitely had their bouts, though. They were defeated by King David, the king that I spoke about earlier. And when they lost, they had to then pay tribute. That's what happened a lot in these days. You lose a war, you lose a fight, and an empire takes over you. Really, a lot of it, as always, just things haven't really changed today, is all about money, and so you pay a tribute. So they're bitter about that. But they at times were kind of allies, at times kind of enemies, but they were kind of like that person who's like friends with the bully, who has like the big mouth. They couldn't necessarily really defeat Israel on their own. They helped the Babylonians to conquer Israel when, with King Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel and all that. When that happened, they helped with that. But they wouldn't have been able to do it on their own. So they're like one of those like kind of annoying short dudes that hang out with like the big buff dude, and like they talk a lot of junk when they're around them because they know they got people backing them up, Or for those of us who maybe watch some of our shows that kind of bounce as a good character and a bad character, maybe like Mona Vanderwall from Pretty Little Liars, or Cheryl Blossom from Riverdale, or something like that, where one episode you're like, they're not that bad of a person, and the next one you're like, oh, actually, yeah. So that's what we're dealing with here, and so they're like, well, maybe they'll be nice to us. Maybe they'll let us in. Maybe they'll throw us some food. Maybe they'll throw us some scraps. Picking up on verse 5. At dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, not a man was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us. So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. So God did something so powerful, so disruptive, that the Arameans were under the impression, they heard this rumble and this noise, that a massive army was coming. And so they thought to themselves, this is even bigger than the Israelites. This has to be Egyptians, Hittites, and Israelites all together. And this was an absolute diversion from the Lord. Again, the officer who said just 3 verses prior to this, man, God doesn't work in those kind of miraculous ways. God doesn't do those sorts of things. Well, God did it. So much so that these people scrammed and they left everything. I mean, they thought something was coming so bad that they left everything. They left gold, silver, clothes. I mean, they just jetted. They just ran. They're like, whatever I've got on my back or whatever I can put in my pockets or whatever that is, that's what I'm taking. That's all I've got. I want my life. And they left. So picking up in verse 8 with the lepers, the men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp and entered one of the tents. They ate and drank and carried away silver, gold, and clothes, and went off and hid them. They returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid them also. So my dudes are like squirrels, right? Right? So they're going and they're just imagine this. They're just going and they're obviously starving, and so they're eating, but at the same time they're like, ooh, that's shiny. Ooh, some new denim. Let me grab that. Ooh, like I can get a chain, right? I don't make enough money for a chain. I can get a chain. And they're like, well, I want more of this stuff, right? And kind of the greed sets in their hearts. So they're like, you know what? I'm gonna go dig a hole like a squirrel. And kind of save all the acorns, right? I'm going to save all this stuff and I'll come back to it. So they did that a few times. And then in verse 9, a light bulb kind of switches in their heads. Then they said to each other, we're not doing right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let's go at once and report this back to the royal palace. They have a moment outside themselves where they go, this isn't right. There's people back in the city. There's children. There's parents. There's people that are suffering. They need this. Now, again, we shouldn't be so quick to judge about them not necessarily thinking of everybody else right away. Let's face it, they were the forgotten. Right? They were already outside the city walls. In some ways with leprosy, they'd have funerals for people before they even died because they would just go off and die on their own. I mean, imagine how lonely that is to be part of the forgotten. And so maybe we should cut them some slack that they didn't think of everybody else before they thought of themselves because everybody else had already forgotten about them. But they said, this is a day of good news, and good news needs to be shared. And we see this theme all throughout the scriptures. And I have that, so if Griffin, you want to pop down to Romans 10:15. Romans 10:15 says this, as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And here's the thing about the Bible and the scriptures is we see there are people that God chooses. People that are anointed, that are chosen, right? But they're never chosen just for themselves. We see this right away, early on. We see this with Abraham when he has to move. We see this with Moses. People who are being chosen and called, the people of Israel, the Israelites. We also have to remember, being chosen and anointed doesn't just mean blessings on blessings on blessings. We've seen many of these people who are chosen or anointed that go through some stuff, that face persecution, that face great or experience great loss, that struggle, that suffer. We see that. And again, when we talk about being anointed, that's the crushing of the olive to get the oil to be anointed with. Well, what happens to the olive? It gets crushed. It gets pressed. There's suffering there. But they said, this is a day of good news because good news needs to be told. Right? This is life-saving stuff, and that's good news that needs to be told. And Paul writes in Romans 10:15, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And he's talking about the best news ever. He's talking about the one who saves. He's talking about Jesus and what he's done for humanity. And how Jesus came and lived and died on a cross so that humanity that is filled with spiritual leprosy, that has leprosy of the heart, that has been stained by sin and greed and selfishness, that has said no to God and his ways, could find redemption. That's the greatest news of all. And that's why Paul writes, happy, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And that was these lepers in this moment. So picking back up in verse 10, so they went and called out to the city gatekeepers and told them, "We went into the Aramean camp, and not a man was there, not a sound of anyone, only tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents left just as they were." The gatekeepers shouted the news. It was reported within the palace. The king got up in the night and said to his officers, "I will tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we are starving. So they have left the camp to hide in the countryside, thinking they will surely come out, and then we will take them alive and get into the city." It's just so easy to doubt the goodness of God. The officer's doing it. The king is doing it. It's just so easy because life has been so tough. Have you ever felt that way? It's just so easy to doubt God and his goodness because you haven't been living in it. You haven't been experiencing it right now. So that's an easy thing to do. And that's why we see so many people in that state of thinking, in that mindset. You ever find yourself in that place? You think to yourself, I know this looks like it could be an opening in my life. I know it looks like a door that might be opening, but let's face it, that's just going to be closed in my face. I'm going to take a step. I'm going to try to walk through that door. I'm going to take a step towards it, and it's going to slam right in my face. This ain't real. This isn't a real blessing. That's what's going on in the hearts of so many Israelites. Back up, verse 13. One of his officers answered, he had a plan. "Let's have some men take 5 of the horses that are left in the city. Their plight will be like that of all the Israelites left here. Yes, they will only be like all of these Israelites who are doomed. So let us send them to find out what happens." So they're like, all right, let's send some people, and they're kind of like sacrificial, right? Like they might get ambushed and they might die, but let's face it, we're all dying. So we're not bad people if we send 5 people to go and kind of be test dummies. So they selected 2 chariots with their horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army. He commanded the drivers, "Go and find out what has happened." They followed them as far as the Jordan, so they just kept going, and they found the whole road strewn with clothing and equipment the Arameans had thrown away in their headlong flight. So the messengers returned and reported to the king. Then the people went out, plundered the camp of the Arameans. So a sea of flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, as the Lord had said. So they sent some spies in, and they noticed that not only was the camp abandoned, but the road all the way to the Jordan would have things discarded that they left along the way that the Arameans thought were holding them back or slowing them up. You want to know what I love about this story? Is the heroes in this chapter are the least likely. They're not the nobles. They're not the great prophets. They're not the great warriors or the kings. They're 4 lepers outside the city walls. You want to know what I love about that? Sometimes I feel like I have a past that's loaded with leprosy. You know, and I think, how could God ever use me? Like, how could I possibly be a pastor when I've done all of this? How could I possibly be used by God when I've got this checkered past? You ever feel that way? I sure know I do. You ever feel like before you even had an opportunity to leave a mark with your life, you had a misstep. Your first step was a bad step. Your first choices when you had your freedom were bad choices. Now you wonder, like, could God use me? Am I the kind of person that God uses, or is it somebody else? Is it the others? Is it someone who's better than me? God says no. That's why I record stories like this. Because you're never too far gone. And God wants to use you. But here's the other thing we learn about this story when it comes to moments, and it's this. Many meaningful moments in your life won't be for you or about you. Many meaningful moments in your life won't be for you or about you. Sure, there will be some. Ladies, your wedding day, absolutely, right, will be for you. But there's going to be many times in your life where you stepping into a defining moment, when you stepping into a life-changing, a trajectory-changing moment, it's not necessarily going to be just for you or necessarily about you. I think we start to learn that as we grow and we mature. You know, as kids, we hear this saying, right? It's better to give than to receive. But as a kid, you're like, no way. It is definitely better to receive than it is to give. When my parents give me something, or when I get something for Christmas, like, that feeling is incredible. Then as we grow, as we mature, as we develop relationships, as we have people in our life that mean a lot to us, and we start to experience the feeling of what it's like to give them something. And then sometimes we experience the joy of what it's like to give a stranger something, someone we don't even know. Many of the moments in which God wants to use you, He wants to use you and other people, and that's kind of what Scott talked about last week when he talked about stepping out of our comfort and stepping into other people's stuff, stepping into tough situations. I mean, the lepers didn't have to do that. They could have just sat there and said, hey, maybe eventually they're going to send someone. They'll probably discover this. There's many people in the city palace. They've got guys on horses. This can be discovered. Let's just chill here. Let's rest up. Let's recover. Life's probably been tough for them, right? They probably had a great night's sleep. They've been feeling pain as a result to the ailment they have on their skin, and then they've been feeling hunger pains. They could have just waited and said, hey, but they thought to themselves, this isn't right. This life isn't just about me. My life is not just about me. It's about those around me. People I know and perhaps people I don't. And so the question I have for you tonight is, will you step into that moment and allow God to use you to bring life to others? If you would, please, pray with me. Thank you. You're so kind tonight. Thank you for your attention. And I know these few moments we have together, I know it has nothing to do with me. I do not think that in a few moments, like, I can change your life. I don't think I can do that. But here's the thing. I think God can. So I don't know what you walked in with tonight. I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know if you're struggling with some serious doubt. I don't know if you question if God's ever really going to be able to use you. I don't know if your past haunts you. I don't know, but God does. That's what's most important. That comforts me. And if anything's resonated with you tonight, I'm hoping that's a source of comfort for you that you got through the scriptures. Maybe you're here tonight, and maybe you've never had a moment in your life where you've surrendered your own life to Jesus so that you can experience the life He has for you. I did that as a teenager. I was a mess. I had addiction issues. I hurt people. I hurt myself. And in a service just like this, I sensed the reality of Jesus. And I thought to myself, there's no way I could live up to the expectations of what it means to be this religious person that follows Jesus. But it seems so real to me right now. So I got to make a move. Maybe that's you here tonight. I know what that feeling's like. Maybe you want to start that faith journey with Jesus and give your life to Him. I can help you with that, just like someone helped me. It can start with a simple introduction with God, where you say a prayer to Him, acknowledging some things and inviting Christ into your life. If that's you here tonight, I want to invite you to say this prayer with me. You don't even have to say it out loud because God can hear your thoughts. And it's not about getting all the words right. It's about the posture of your heart to God. Let's say this, dear God. God, I know that I have leprosy in my heart. I know that I've done wrong things in my life, and I've walked away from you and the way you design life. And so, Jesus, I confess that you're the Savior of the world. And God, I want to say that you're going to be the Savior of my life. So I place my life, my trust, my faith in you, Jesus. Come into my life that I can experience your life. Heads bowed, eyes closed, no one looking around. If that was you tonight, I'm going to ask you to do one thing that's kind of bold. But I want to encourage you, you're in a safe place. If you said that prayer tonight, would you raise your hand and look right at me? I want to do two things. I want to remember you in a closing prayer, probably not by name because I probably don't know it. But I also want to get something in your hand that will help you out. If that was you tonight where you said, this is my moment, I want to give my life to Jesus, would you raise your hand and look right at me? I know it takes some courage. Hey, I get it. But I don't want to miss anyone. I won't draw it out or anything. Just want to make sure I don't miss anyone. I see you in the back row. That's great. Just keep your hand up sorry, and I see you in the back as well. If you just keep your hand up, I'm going to pray over you right now, and I have a leader coming right to you to get something in your hand. Dear God, I see hands kind of, but you see hearts absolutely with absolute clarity. And I just pray that you would be so real in this moment to these individuals, and they would know beyond a shadow of a doubt, Jesus, that you're coming into their life right now. All right, those of you who have your hands up, I got some leaders. They're going to explain a booklet to you. You're not signing up for anything. You're not joining anything. They're just going to explain to you what it is and how it can help you and how you can use it. They're going to do that over in the cafe area because it's easier to talk there. If you want to bring a friend because you'll feel more comfortable, by all means do that. God, for the rest of us, may the simple stories like those in 2 Kings 7, may it do more than just inspire us. May it encourage us in such a way that by faith we say, God, I want to be used by you. I want to have moments in my life where I'm used by you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Vintage. If God spoke to you through this talk, please click on the button titled, How Do I Follow Jesus on our website, and feel free to contact us and let us know what God is doing in your life. Thanks again for watching.